In medicine, the way that we are trained is there's a very heavy hand on professionalism. And in recent years, very recently, I'd say within the last 2 to 3 years, there's been even this more frequently used term called weaponized professionalism. It's where you use the term professionalism, it gets used against you, actually, where you feel like, someone might be like, well, that's not professional. You need to show up and be professional. Why is professional have to be something that kind of covers over, that's like a shield that I take off and on? I'm professional and then I get to leave and go home. Why can't I be me and be professional?
Hi, welcome to the ADHD Social Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Caroline Maguire. Before we get into it, this is part 2 of my conversation with expert Dr. Jessica Ching. If you have not watched part 1, click the link in the description and go to part 1 and then come back to part 2. In part 2, we really do a deep dive into sort of these masks, and professionalism is a mask. And this leads to actually a risk of burnout and has other mental health effects. And Dr. Ching also talks about compartmentalization in case there are times when you feel like you have to wear that mask, and really what we can do to process our emotions and avoid those mental health effects. This is just amazing, groundbreaking information. Let's get into it. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. One of the things that you found was that this idea of authenticity, I don't want to put words in your mouth, it's linked to increased, positive results that help with suicidality and depression and burnout. So tell me how, because this is amazing.
So when you look at so we broke it down by the domains that we just talked about: the authentic living, the accepting external influence, and the self-alienation domains within the scale. And when authentic living goes up, the risk of burnout, depression, and suicide go down. And the reverse is true with the accepting external influence and self-alienation. As those get higher, burnout, depression, and suicide risk goes higher. It's really profound too. In some of the different data that we analyzed, it was as high as a 30% increase, for instance, on self-alienation. If your score went up 1 point on one question. So each question, I should explain. So each question has a 7-point Likert scale. So it's like never to always, basically, or on a 1 to 7 scale. And if it went up 1 point, so from a 3 to a 4, you're feeling like it was a 4 that day instead of a 3. In some analyses, it went up about 30% in your burnout score, and it's 30% increase in your depression score, almost. And then it went up 1.5 to 1.6 times in your suicidal risk. 1 point
1 point
on one question.
One question. So that means every question is important. That means every question is important.
Yeah, and it's that powerful. It's that powerful of a mitigating tool. The reverse is, it's like, if I can make it go down 1 point, well, then I've just decreased all those things.
Oh my God, that's so true, right? And now you're talking about, you're going to use science words, but I'm going to use an emotional word. It's a bomb now, right? So me bringing this down 1 point, now my ability to live authentically, my ability to feel all those things means I have a balm against burnout, suicide, depression. But if I go up, now I remember this, but I don't remember all the data, but now I'm in danger, like literally in danger.
Yeah. So it's and that was true across we did analyses in multiple different specialties at different points in their career and training, and it was consistent throughout. So it wasn't like just in affecting this population over here this is across the board. And I think if you looked at it, it's not probably just physicians. It makes sense, when I'm sure with your training education background in psychology, I'm sure it makes sense. You're like, yes, of course that would be important. But we needed the objective data to be able to get someone to listen and to be able to hopefully better advocate for change. In medicine, the way that we are trained is there's a very heavy hand on professionalism. And in recent years, very recently, I'd say within the last 2 to 3 years, there's been even this more frequently used term called weaponized professionalism. And um, it's where you use the term professionalism, it gets used against you, actually, where you feel like, someone might be like, well, that's not professional. You need to show up and be professional. And that's one of the things that came out on the Authentic Doctor survey in the qualitative survey online that people wrote in, was just this idea that, like, I want to be me. Like, why is professional like have to be something that kind of covers over, that's like a shield that I take off and on? I'm professional, and then I get to leave and go home. Like, why can't I be me and be professional?
And, it generally felt to me like there was an underlying tone of, I can be this, in order to have this high authenticity, I need coping skills. So that was the other thing I just wanted to sort of ask you about is like in the written survey where people were writing these paragraphs to you and sort of downloading information, did people mention like, I need the vocabulary, I need the coping skills, I need to, because you can't even be this mission driven person and sort of take joy in that if you're so besieged and you're in survival mode. Like your needs aren't met. So I just wondered, did people write in about that and say like, hey, I need coping skills?
Actually, what I saw was more the opposite, where, like, one of the questions on the Authentic Doctor survey asked them what would help them. And they would just say, like, I don't know. I don't know where to start. And it became really evident that, like, they could describe their problem, and there were different levels of insight with how they described it. But then there were a lot of times where it got down to, like, what would help you. And it was something that was, like, not untrue, like, "Oh, I wish I had an office assistant," or, "I wish I was paid more," or, and that could all very well be true, but it missed the inside of, like, they couldn't cope with what was going on, and they had no, based on the way they described it and the outpouring of emotion, it's like there's a disconnect there of, like, they don't even know what they don't know.
Yeah. But that makes sense too, because I
Mhm.
mean, I was thinking of you I was thinking of this meeting and just, I mean, everyone in this house knows I'm meeting with you today. Everyone knows how excited I am about all of this. And, it starts in high school, right? So my guess is you were a really incredible student. But I watch the young people, and I went to a high school where like everyone's dad or mom was a doctor. And so it started with like, I don't have time to process this emotion because I have to get an A in organic chemistry. I have to get an A in AP bio. Like it starts so young. So by the time you take a survey like yours, I'm sure there's so much compartmentalization that like they don't really know what they need. I mean, that to me is part of this.
Yes, you're exactly right. In the medical student, there were some medical students that also took the Authentic Doctor survey. Um, the medical students are not included in the quantitative surveys because they are under different, like, educational parameters, within the institution system that we administered, and it required, a different approval for medical students. So they were left off of that, but they were in the qualitative research, and they often wrote, the paragraphs that they would write were really interesting about trying to decide their identity, actually. So they didn't write about coping skills in that way, but they would say, like, I can see that, I am this person, but to succeed in this career, I have to be like these people. And I really, I want to be that type of, that doctor in that field. So how do I pick? Do I pick to continue being myself, or do I pick to be like them? Do I conform? And it was interesting how often that they wrote about that, that turmoil of and trying to, even if they weren't going to be in that career, just trying to please their current doctor they were working with to get a good grade because they needed good grades to apply to the career that they wanted to do. And so I know it starts well before then, and there's probably some self-selection to end up in a field that is prone to compartmentalization.
Right.
But I hope that since they can articulate that they still struggle, that they can see their identity crisis like that, I hope that there's still time to intervene and to let them know that they don't have to conform, that they can move on as themselves, and that hopefully we're going to create a system on the other side that is accepting of that.
Jessica, that's beautiful. I hope those around you really appreciate the groundbreaking nature of this. I really do, because I think it's remarkable. And I'm so glad you found this path forward, because so often, like in the burnout literature, it really seems like, well, take a couple years off and you'll eventually feel better. And I'm like, people are going to take 2 years off if they're high performing people. That's not realistic, you know?
I don't even how would you pay your bills?
I know. How would you pay your bill? I mean, it's just funny. But I mean, there's so many applications for it too. In terms of other, I think other areas where this is an
Mhm.
issue, where there's so much compartmentalization. But I mean, when you think about this idea of the authenticity, like, what do you think this research really means? Because I think I know what it means, but you're the person doing the research and really pioneering this.
What do I think it means? I think so. I think it means kind of what I was saying just a second ago, that by being ourselves, like by having the freedom and the confidence to do that, I hope that I'm creating that in my daughter. I hope that I am training her to be confident and authentic in who she is, so that by the time that she reaches a crossroads, that she's not feeling like she has to pick, that's not a decision that even crosses her mind. And I would like, the research that we've done, I would like to work backward and train those that are just starting out and to help them. But I really, I believe that we need a system that fosters that. And the way that it's set up for physicians, it's just not, it doesn't, you know, and there's different ways to adapt it. But they're all very difficult to persuade because it means changing what seems to be working for everybody else, but you're ignoring the people that are silently suffering. So I think that it's twofold. I think it's the individual, to embrace their own authenticity and to encourage that. But I think to have a system that embraces that, because when the system embraces that, that's when you get the belonging. And that's the other piece of authenticity is the ability to belong as yourself.
And that's what people want. Really, that's what people want. People want, that's what people write me about. People write me and say, I really want friends because I really want to feel like I belong, but I don't want to fit in. I don't want to cut off pieces of myself. I don't want to pretend, because I've done that, and it doesn't lead to that real authentic connection. and that fulfillment and all those things. I mean, people know that that's what they want. So I think it is possible. Um, Although the systemic change, I think the research will really help because I think systemic change really comes when we have the data to show people like you can't keep going on this way.
Right. And the hope was in this first layer of research that we rolled out and published, it was just trying to say that it's important. Like that this is a metric that's not being used that people really need to look at. It's not just like how long you work, it's not your salary if you're happy or not with that, it's not how many office like administrative, staff and support you have. Like one the most powerful metric we need to be looking at is how authentic these people feel they can be and how authentic we can get them to be. That is the number one thing, the most powerful thing in all of the literature is what we found with authenticity. And so I think, that was the first installment. And then after that, is rolling out what other things improve authenticity. And that's really the research, the direction we're moving in now is looking at what can we show with data that improves authenticity that then you could translate into more practical applications even.
Oh, that is the piece that I kept, jotting in the margin, like, how can they be authentic? And I
Mhm.
think there needs to be an avatar for that, right? Because, if someone is younger and just out of medical school in the residency, they might still be able to see that. But if I've been practicing for 25 years, I have habits, and that habit is probably radical compartmentalization. So you have to show me how I can be that way that will lead to this benefit for mental health, otherwise they probably don't know how.
You're totally right. I was talking with a close friend recently, and they were saying they had worked with a surgeon who was well over 80 years old. And I said, and the person still operates? And they said, yeah. And I said, does this person do anything else? Like, do they have a family? Like, what does their spouse think about that? What are their like, you know, what does their family think about them still working? Like most people would be retired and want to spend quality time with their, you know, close relationships. And this person said, "Well, I don't think that this person has any of that. I think if this is who they are. This is all that they know is to be a surgeon. And if and so, you're talking about people like that too. They're like, this is their identity is to
Right.
be a surgeon. They've dropped everything else that really is them, and they've just become the job. And that's that is radical compartmentalization to the nth degree and carried on for a lifetime. And I don't know that those people, I don't know that they'll be able to unravel that, but maybe we can start chipping away at least on the ones, that are younger and able to get them to see before it becomes something that's lifelong.